Welcome to the program. Our sign language interpreter tonight is William Silla. We begin here in Nairobi, where embattled PSC chairman Ababu Namwamba finally released the now famous audio recording that suggests that members of his committee were bribed to doctor an audit report.
An MP in the recording claims that Defence Principal Secretary Iringo paid a 1.5 million shilling bribe to Public Accounts Committee members to sanitize the report that adversely mentioned him.
Aaron Ochieng begins our coverage from Parliament buildings tonight.
The Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Committee today heard the damning recording implicating Defence Principal Secretary Iringo in an alleged bribery syndicate of members of the Public Accounts Committee. Suspended PSC Chairman Ababu Namwamba turned the heat on his colleagues, presenting the audio recording to the committee as evidence to clear himself against corruption charges.
It was during one time we were having lunch, and this URP member for KSS called James Bet, he approaches me and he tells me, "Bwana Chairman, I have something to share with you." So we step aside and he tells me, Iringo, the PS, is very annoyed with Anyanga. And I'm like, why would Iringo be annoyed with Anyanga? What is it about? He says he gave Anyanga money to deliver to the committee, and I have confirmed to Iringo that none of us have received that money. And when he went to Iringo, he told Iringo he was seeking this money because he'll bring it to you as the chairman to give to the members. Of course, the moment my name was mentioned in respect of this matter, I got very upset. I told Bet, call Iringo right away. I want to confirm this story. And he did. Mheshimiwa Bet, using his own phone, called Iringo. And he put him on the phone for me to speak to him. And asked him, "Bwana PS, I am here with Mheshimiwa Bet. He has shared some information with me. Is it true that someone actually came to you to solicit for money and used my name?" Iringo was very apologetic. He said, "Yes, someone came here," and he even mentioned him. He said, "Mheshimiwa Nyanga came here," and he said, "Mheshimiwa Nyanga is my friend." Okay, he came here. He said he can talk to you to try to help me in the committee because he was under pressure at that time.
The audio recording implicates members of his committee, including his vice chairperson Cecil Mbarire, who are alleged to have received a 1.5 million shilling bribe from Iringo to delete any adverse mentions of the PS's name in the audit report.
Nikamwambia, but I thought that money would say Iringo was giving you money, and actually he did give him some money. He did give him some money, but what he said is that this money
which you also received.
Yeah, I got 200,000. Then he said the rest of the money
from Anyanga.
Because it's all beauty, Sicily, Pet. And some others, he had 1.5 million, which he said he would give to the 200.
The audio recording suggests that Iringo met MPs Omondi Anyanga, James Bet, Abbas Ahmed, and Samuel Aramam. Anyanga, who received the 1.5 million shillings from Iringo, shared with the rest.
And well, I was calling Honorable Manot a few minutes. And Honorable Manot tells me that Abbas followed him to his hotel, Mashpad. Then he was not keen to sign, but Duarte called him. Akamwambia, sign hiyo whatever you mundu tunataka atoke is not flexible.
I became chairman of this committee against the wish of Jubilee, because in the build-up to the elections for the leadership of this committee, Jubilee through Duale made it very clear that their preference for the chairman of this committee was Anyanga. Even the day we voted, Duale was there in person,
giving money,
weeping and paying people to vote for Anyanga. We even had information at that time that Anyanga had been given money by Kimemia, which he was distributing to members to vote for him.
The embattled Budalangi MP nonetheless refused to disclose who made the recording, but laid bare those who says were present during the taping.
There are 4 voices on that recording, and I will name them for the record. Correct. The first voice on that recording, who is the first speaker, who is making who makes the opening of that recording, is the Honorable Arama Samuel. The second voice on that recording is the Honorable Junet Mohammed. And the other voice is the voice of my party leader.
The session was conducted in the full glare of the cameras after MPs from Western Kenya who accompanied Namwamba vowed to disrupt the session unless the media was allowed.
There are no accusations against him. There are no allegations against him. He's not under any investigation, and this has made his life very difficult.
That indeed the work of the committee we've left should not remain and stop at Public Accounts Committee. Let the investigations, the executions of the mandate of the House powers and privileges cover virtually all committees of Parliament and really the entire Parliament as an institution.
The hearing continues tomorrow with MPs Omondi Anyanga, Abbas Ahmed, James Bett and Cecil Mbarire expected to be questioned. Aaron Ocheng, KTN.
Let's continue that story. And the Public Accounts Committee now warns disciplinary and prosecutorial action taken against the Interior PS Iringo for allegedly misappropriating 2.8 billion shillings. So just what is Iringo accused of? Well, in its report, the PSC says there are no documents to support the so-called confidential expenditure, which made it impossible to tell how the funds were utilized. The report continues that there were daily cash withdrawals that could not be explained and which went way above the set ceiling of 700,000 shillings per week. In addition, the PSC has accused the ministry, whose accounting officer was Iringo, of running a parallel account to the one held at the CBK. This parallel account, they say, was customized to facilitate unlimited cash withdrawals. Another curious allegation in this report is that all these transactions were handled by a single officer, a certain Ben Kehia, who is a senior accountant at the office of the president. The PSC now recommends that appropriate action be taken by the appointing authority against Iringo, who is the chief accounting officer at the ministry.
Well, as we continue this conversation about corruption, our hashtag that we continue to use is Rogue Watchdogs. Now, between 2013 and 2014, Kenya's Corruption Perception Index dropped from 27 to 25. That's not good. And Jubilee government did make quite a few specific promises about what they were going to do about corruption. But what is the reality of what they promised and what they're doing? Well, here to help us understand that this evening, John Allen Namu, how's it looking?
It's not looking very good, to be quite honest, Nancy. This was the third pillar of their manifesto pledge, and if you go through it, it makes for very sad reading, especially if you are hoping for some fight against corruption. But before we get into that, let's look at what Uhuru Kenyatta said with respect to corruption just a week ago and the subject of sacred cows.
We will hold our anti-corruption bodies accountable now going forward, and that there is no sacred cow in this government, none, including myself. There is none. I have no right, no authority to call a minister, to call a permanent secretary, to call a chief executive, to tell them to award a contract to a particular individual. There is a process. Everybody must know that if you hold that office, you must do things in accordance with the law, not in accordance with pressure of people who are calling you atifanya hii fanya ile. Wewe mwenyewe ndio utakuwa held accountable. Ukifanya, ujue wewe utafungwa peke yako, na ile story ya zamani ya kufikiria ati ukishikwa uanze kulia ya kwamba kabila letu linanyanyaswa, sijui Wakikuyu wananyanyaswa, Wakalenjin wananyanyaswa, Waluo wananyanyaswa, ujue wewe ni mwizi peke yako.
All right, the president there being very, very specific on what he wants with respect to corruption in this country in terms of trends changing, not calling on your community or your friends to defend you when it comes to corruption. But is that the reality? But let's look back at the Jubilee manifesto, the third pillar of the Jubilee Manifesto, which was Wazi or openness, talking about stamping out corruption. And here's the promises and the facts. The first promise was to give the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission powers to prosecute. This is a long-running debate. It had been there in the Kibaki regime as well, but the fact is, there has been no move to empower the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, despite the fact that the Jubilee government has a super majority legislatively. They could have pushed laws in Parliament to give the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission teeth. Granted that the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission should have got teeth in the 10th Parliament, but those were whittled down out of Chapter 6. The Jubilee government could have done this. This is something that they were able to, was within their ambit to be able to push through, to give the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission more teeth and relieve some of the pressure from the DPP's office with respect to prosecuting corruption in Kenya. A second promise that the Jubilee Manifesto gave was to set up county anti-corruption boards that can refer charges to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission and the DPP to the national office. But the fact is, there still are only 5 offices around the country representing the Ethics Anti-Corruption Commission. That's Nairobi, Mombasa, Eldoret, Kisumu, as well as Garissa. So nothing has happened in that regard, but that falls squarely in the ambit of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, which should have been able to be more proactive with respect to setting up these anti-corruption boards. Now, third is the promise on enacting legislation to freeze the assets of Kenyan companies found guilty banning anyone convicted of corruption charges from working in government or in any public sector. But for that to happen, there have to be convictions of people on the charge of corruption. That within the 2 years, give or take a month and a few days, of the Jubilee government's reign has not happened. No officials have been arrested and convicted with respect to corruption. The fourth one, again, I was talking about, is the promise of enacting legislation to freeze the assets of Kenyan companies found guilty of corruption. Now, if you go back to 2009, the Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act was passed by President Mwai Kibaki. I think it was the 31st of December 2009. Wasn't enacted until 2014. So that can be given to the Jubilee government with respect to the enactment of that law, taking Kenya off of a blacklist by the United States on countries that have gaps legislatively that could allow for funding of terrorist organizations and money laundering. But in the same period, around the time when this law was enacted in November 2014, 2 reports came out by 2 auditing firms, Ernst & Young and PricewaterhouseCoopers, which pretty much said the same thing. And here comes the fact now. The fact is that 1 of 3 Kenyan companies have paid bribes to win contracts. And tendering is one of the biggest sinks for economic crimes in this country, meaning that both the public sector and the private sector have sort of joined hands in an illegal alliance to be corrupt. And if this law were working, then we'd have been able to see more in terms of prosecutions of people, not just in the public sector, but in the private sector. Lots of scandals around there. Think about some of the scandals around tendering. For instance, one comes to mind is the laptop tendering, which was, by the way, a flagship project of the Jubilee government, but that hasn't happened because of irregularities. Another promise that the Jubilee government gave was to ban foreign companies found guilty of corrupt practices from operating in Kenya. Now, just from my count of the World Bank report on ineligible companies and individuals, what happens is the World Bank bans these companies that have been engaged in corrupt practices from doing business with it. There are at least 2 international companies still operating in Kenya, one building a library for the Kenyatta University, another being a construction company, and 4 local companies that have been banned from doing business with the World Bank. Now, that's just doing business with the World Bank. We don't know how much this extends to with respect to companies that have been found to have engaged in corruption. The final promise in Jubilee's manifesto pledge was to introduce automatic freezing of assets of anyone indicted on corruption charges. Now, we all know the story there. Anglo leasing, the charges have just been read to a number of people, including Deepak Kamani, Chris Murungaru, other people who were serving in government, but have their assets been frozen? A big question. The answer there squarely is no. With respect to other corruption charges that have been leveled against people in public, they may not have been brought to court. For instance, the Mumias sugar scandal or the Chicken Gate indictees, they may have not been appeared formally in court, but the charges and the evidence of corruption is really out there for everybody to see. So in terms of Jubilee's record, in terms of fighting corruption, according to a document that they themselves authored, they are not doing very well, Nancy.
It does look like the road to a more corrupt system is actually paved with good intentions, because a lot of great intentions, but nothing seems to be happening.
All the way, falling short.
Well, thank you very much, John, for those insights. And that actually brings us to our big cue tonight, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, Nancy. And tonight we are asking you, has the Jubilee administration done enough in fighting corruption in the country? Has the Jubilee administration done enough in fighting corruption in the country? You can get in touch with us. Our SMS line is 22155, or you can get in touch with us at KTN, at KTN News KD, at Kachungira, or at Wilson_Mburu. Remember that when you send your text, remember to start with a yes or no, so that we are able to tally that into a poll result at the end of this live newscast.
That's right. We look forward to hearing from you.
Now let's turn to some news just in from Somalia, and a suspected drone attack has killed 3 members of the terror group Al-Shabab, including a suspected mastermind of the Westgate attack.
Now, media outlets from Somalia are reporting that the Al-Shabab high-ranking commanders were killed in a U.S. airstrike in Badire town in southern Somalia.
The top commander, Aden Garar, is reported to have been a key architect of the attack on Westgate and planting of IEDs in the vehicle that was later intercepted in Mombasa. Now, you all remember the story that went by the hashtag Justice for Njeri?
Well, now Mohammed Salim, the police officer accused of causing the death of a 22-year-old girl in Lamu, has been arrested.
Salim surrendered himself to the Malindi CID headquarters, accompanied by his lawyer, and he says that he has been wrongfully accused and condemned for an incident that was not entirely his fault.
The face of the police officer said to be responsible for the death of 22-year-old Margaret Njeri. Mohammed Salim is said to have caused the death of Njeri after he hit her with the butt of a gun off a speeding boda in an attempt to make the boda riders stop. She suffered severe head injuries which later led to her death. The whereabouts of Salim have remained unknown until today, when he made his way to the Malindi CID headquarters. His lawyer says he has been unwell.
Papa na yeye alikuwa ni mgonjwa, lakini sasa hivi amepona na yuko tayari kuface the law.
The actions of Salim have received condemnation from Kenyans all over the country, with human rights bodies calling for the arrest and prosecution of the officer. But Salim's lawyer says the incident that led to the eventual death of Njeri was an accident.
Client wangu wanashtakiwa kwamba amesababisha hiyo ajali ambayo imesababisha kifo cha huyo msichana, lakini ilikuwa si kitu ambacho amefanya makusudi.
His client, who has been missing since the death of Njeri, spoke out for the first time since the incident occurred. And according to him, the truth of what happened that day has not been told, and he is being persecuted unfairly.
Kulingana vile public na politicians wa Lamu County wamechukulia hii kitu so much political, wamenishtaki na wamenconvict through the newspaper, wametoa a story which is not the real story.
The move by Salim to present himself to the police may now see the 22-year-old laid to rest. Her mother had categorically stated that she would not bury her daughter before the policeman is arrested.
Mimi ninaomba serikali inionyeshe yule mtu ni nani. Mambo ya matanga sina haja naye.
The Office of the Director of Prosecution had recommended that the policeman be prosecuted and charged with manslaughter. Linda Ogutu, KTN Prime.
From one murder mystery to another, here in Nairobi this time, the Director of Public Prosecutions has ordered that 7 suspects held over the death of Kabet MP George Mushai and his 3 aides be charged with murder Friday. The suspects are expected in court on Friday to officially face charges. Police had also recommended that the suspects be charged with robbery with violence. It has emerged that 3 of the men are ex-convicts. Profiles from police and prisons show that the 3 were in October 2010 sentenced to 4 years in jail over a robbery incident in the Kabete area. They were sentenced by then Kibera Senior Principal Magistrate Rose Nzioka. They were released after serving the sentence last year before recruiting one of their accomplices. The 4 men, alongside 2 other women, Margaret Njeri Washuri and Jane Wanjiru Kamau, alias Shiro, are set to be charged with, among other charges, robbery with violence. Charges another suspect, Simon Gashamba, is also being held for after he was found with a mobile phone belonging to one of the victims.
Now, those are just some of the cases that the new Inspector General of Police, Joseph Boynet, will be mulling over as he takes charge at Jogoo House. But now he has to contend with a slightly different kind of order. Boynet has been given a 60-day ultimatum by a Nakuru court to arrest the Teacher Service Commission Secretary Gabriel Lengoiboni and escort him to Committee Maximum Security Prison for contempt of court. Lengoiboni was committed to 6 months civil jail for failing to release 16.7 billion shillings in pension and salary arrears for retired teachers.
Inspector General of Police Joseph Boynet took over operations Thursday and declared he'll prioritize the fight on terrorism and drug trafficking during his tenure. The acting Inspector General of Police Samuel Arachi handed over the instruments of authority to Boynet. The ceremony was witnessed by service commanders of the various police formations. Boynet said drug trafficking, human and contraband smuggling and poaching remain a threat to national security.
My priorities are 1. Fighting terrorism. We all know the magnitude of the threat that is facing us. We all know what terrorism has done for our tourism sector.
Earlier in the day in Nakuru, Deputy Inspector General of Police Samuel Arachi appeared before Nakuru High Court Judge Janet Mulwa after he was summoned to appear in person to explain why the Teacher Service Commission boss Gabriel Lengoiboni has not been arrested and committed to civil jail as had been ordered by the court on February 20th. Arachi told the court that he was out of office on official duty when the orders were served on February 26th and was informed of the court orders on March 3rd when he reported back to office. Arachi said his efforts to enforce the court orders have been unsuccessful because the TSC boss has been out of the country on official duty attending a conference in Rabat, Morocco. He, however, told the court that he has alerted the Immigration Department to inform him as soon as Lengoiboni arrives in Kenya for police to effect arrest orders.
The arrest will be effected and be presented as a court order. This included directed the Inspector General to have the CEO TSC arrested and escorted to Committee Maximum Prison for 6 months.
Justice Janet Mulwa observed that the over 52,000 retired teachers have not been paid pension and salary arrears 7 years after the court entered its judgment in their favor. Justice Mulwa discharged previous orders issued to Arachi after he appeared in court and directed that the new Inspector General of Police Joseph Boynet effect Lengoiboni's arrest within 60 days.
I direct that the new Inspector General of Police do apprehend and escort the TSC Secretary General Gabriel Lengoiboni to Committee Maximum Prison for detention for a period of 6 months in conformity with these court orders issued on the 16th May 2015.
The teachers who retired in 1997 to 2003 went to court in 2006 in a class suit demanding for recalculation of their salaries and pension based on a collective bargaining agreement entered by the government and Kenya National Union of Teachers, NAT, after the 1997 teachers' strike. The case will be mentioned on May 14th. Patrick Amimo, KTN.
Next tonight, we talk about student politics, the ugly kind. A student from the University of Nairobi was earlier today stabbed and seriously injured following what seems to be a politically instigated attempt on his life. The fourth-year student was rushed to MP Shah Hospital after an irate mob of students descended on him outside the Vice-Chancellor's office. And as KTN's Timothy Otieno reports, this is not the first time that an incident in the university where political undertones degenerate into criminal activity is occurring.
It's a group of students gathered at the MP Shah Hospital to visit one of their own. Calford Odhiambo, a fourth-year student of Nairobi University, is nursing stab wounds inflicted on him this morning. A vicious assault that has left the political science student fighting for his life at the hospital. Students claim the attack on Calford is an extension of the institution's political rivalry ahead of the SONU elections slated for 10th of April this year. The stabbing has sparked a blame game within the institution on which camp executed the attack on a fellow student. Students claiming the run-up to the SONU election has been marred by threats and intimidation of those challenging the re-election of the SONU chairman.
In the lead election, there were two factions. There was Group A and there was Group B. Group A has their lead commissioner that they're supporting. Group B also has a candidate that they're supporting for a lead commissioner position. Unfortunately, there was a scuffle and people were fighting.
We are preparing for the SONU elections and we are supposed to choose the student lead commissioner. When the student commissioners walked in, they were beaten up. One of them was knifed, was stabbed, and right now is in the ICU.
The university is currently undergoing a wave of political campaigns ahead of a much-anticipated election pitting current SONU chair Babu Owino against a number of comrades gunning for his seat.
There are a group of people that want to control these elections with violence. And they are harassing us and they are beating people up, they are beating commissioners up, and we were going to just conduct a very peaceful election, electing the lead commissioner.
SONU elections generate a lot of controversy with reports of assault on students in the quest for political dominance. Timothy Otieno, KTN.
Well, it's time to take a short break, but not before I remind you of our big question tonight, and it's all about corruption and what the government has done to fight this menace. We are asking you, has the Jubilee administration done enough in fighting corruption in the country? Let's take a few tweets here before we go on a break. Michael Wafula says, the Jubilee government is doing a lot to entrench corruption in its fabric. Top leadership lacks moral high ground to fight the rot.
All right, well, remember the hashtag we're using is Rogue Watchdogs. That's on Twitter. I'll read an SMS here from Rito in Mbakasi. You say the Jubilee government has failed. They have given Waititu a go-ahead in Kabet nomination, whereas they are aware of orders in force declaring him unfit for any public office due to reasons that are in the public domain. Now, Nakuru County former Majority Leader James Kipkoros Tuwei is the new Deputy Speaker for the Assembly after he was voted and sworn in today.
Oh, this follows the dramatic ousting of Samuel Tunoi that saw the floor of the House turned into a battlefield.
Here's Ian Wafula with that story.
They say time waits for no man, a phrase that probably motivated the members of the county assembly in Nakuru to quickly go to the ballot to elect a new speaker in just less than 24 hours after the ousting of Samuel Tonui. Despite being ejected in a violent showdown, Tonui was not stopped by the ousting. He went on and contended for the same seat against his opponent, James Tuwei. 42 of the 65 members voted in favor of James Tuwei, while 22 voted for Tonui, forcing him to sit back and watch as his counterpart was sworn in as the new deputy speaker.
Do swear that I shall always truly and diligently serve the people.
This defeat, I cannot accept it. There are so many irregularities which was followed. You know, they changed the standing orders in one day. They voted me one day with short notice. So those are malicious, and there is nothing like that which can happen. You cannot change standing orders to suit your interest.
The outgoing speaker claims differences with the speaker Susan Kihika on administration issues was part of what led to his ousting. A defense statement contested by a section of MCAs.
Last week, governors were in the Senate to defend the budgets because some things which have been put there and are not realizable.
Close to 1 week now, rivalry and political acrimony shut down operations of the Nakuru County Assembly as the Speaker and her Deputy Speaker's camps traded accusations.
Well, next on KTN Prime, it's time to get down to business, and we join Abby Agina in our business studio for that. Good evening, Abby. Kenya Power is embarking on a pretty serious project, aren't they?
Oh yes, Nancy, they are looking forward to demolish some of the houses that are around where they have put up their power lines. Well, we have that and much more on KTN Business after the break.
In association with Star Times.
Welcome back, and you're just in time for the day's business news. I am Abby Agina. Electricity distributor Kenya Power is calling for the demolition of more than 1,000 illegal structures constructed under the heavy-duty power lines in Nairobi's expansive Eastlands area. The distributor says that its infrastructure has been encroached by informal settlements, posing a real threat to lives as well as making it difficult to carry out maintenance. KTN's Charles Gitonga has more.
Over 300 households and businesses living and operating in illegal structures constructed under electricity lines in Nairobi's Eastlands area will have to seek alternative accommodation as Kenya Power calls for demolition of these structures. The power distributor reckons that this kind of encroachment has made it difficult and expensive to access their infrastructure whenever there is a need to do so.
The challenges we face at the moment with respect to access for maintenance of infrastructure is the fact that we can no longer access the wayleaf. We can no longer access our infrastructure because of the infringement of the wayleaf trace.
Kenya Power has highlighted Kangudo Road area between Outer Ring Road and Rai, the bypass junction, Kayole Matopeni, Tasia near Baraka Estate, Pipeline, Mihango, Utawala, Kiangombe Settlement Scheme, Mukuru, Kibra and Mathare slums as some of the most affected areas.
An outage that could have taken about half an hour ends up taking 3 hours because we have to consult with those communities, we have to seek access with those communities, we have to find ways and means of accessing our installation.
The people living and operating businesses under the power lines are in constant danger owing to the high voltage the lines carry. Furthermore, vandalism and illegal connections to households are a recipe for power outages in major installations across the city. The trend is said to be costing the country millions of shillings in terms of future investments.
Which investors are going to be putting their money at KPLC if they can see that the investments already put in place are being undermined?
The power distributor is now calling on the Nairobi County government and other relevant authorities to assist in clearing its infrastructure of any infringement.
And that appropriate authority is here with us, the administration and the county government, to be able to request those guys or advise those guys to forget our wayleaf.
Charles Gitonga, KTN.
Well, one of the options that Kenya Power is looking forward to is the undergrounding. Let's see how that pans out. Moving on, the Flame Tree Group has delved into the food business with the acquisition of 4 food and snack brands from Chirac, Kenya. The listed company is making a play into the food business as part of a strategy to grow its fast-moving consumer goods portfolio. The company did not disclose the amount involved in the deal, only stating that the 4 brands had a turnover of 90 million shillings in 2014. The 4 brands Flame Tree is making a play for include Nature's own range of spices, Chig's potato, crepes, honeycomb biscuits and the nut processing business. As part of the deal, Flame Tree will also be acquiring the company's 60 employees and the Nairobi-based factory and distribution assets. According to the group CEO Harold Bangera, the deal is expected to boost earnings while diversifying its FMCG portfolio. Flame Tree is a well-known market in the Roto tanks and Zoe cosmetic products. Moving on, the government is in the final stages of concluding legislation that could pave way for the reintroduction of high-capacity buses to serve commuters within the country's metropolis. The Ministry of Transport has already submitted to the government printer new regulations governing licensing of high-capacity buses that will have provisions that will allow commuters to stand as well as to sit. But how does this go towards solving the commuting experience in the country? Well, I had a chat with the Principal Secretary for Transport, Nuvamuli. Let's listen in. Kenya's transport sector is one of the most vibrant in the region, with over 20,000 registered public service vehicles operating across the country. Transport business has been booming. And although the matatu industry has continued to register well over 10% annual growth, the sector has mutated into one of the most uncultured. Attempts to tame operators have been futile, with poor regulation and weak enforcement standing in the way. The latest move to restore sanity into the sector was placing a freeze on importation of 14-seater PSVs serving Nairobi.
We have suspended for the purposes of reviewing the routes and doing proper studies on the passenger demand and PSV supply.
One of the other measures that the Transport Ministry is banking on is setting up of a bus rapid transit system for buses.
We will be having high-capacity buses. We are actually preparing the industry for that development. And that's why those regulations are coming in.
The new regulation stipulates the National Transport and Safety Authority shall license PSVs which shall carry both sitting and standing passengers. The new rules go on to state that all PSV buses should have a system that will reconcile the total number of passengers on board at all times. Failure to this attracts a fine of 5,000 each for the driver, conductor and owner of the vehicle.
So what's in it for us is a total reduction of cost of doing business, total cost of reduction of costs of commuting and transiting the city.
Kenya's transport sector in the early 80s and 90s had an efficient bus transport system ran under the Kenya Bus Service, which dwindled once the market was liberalized. The buses plied all the key routes within and outside the central business district at pocket-friendly rates. The Transport Ministry is keenly looking to revive the buses.
These high capacity, maybe with 40 sitting, 60 standing, maybe 100, 120 passengers, would actually replace maybe 10, 14 seaters.
Currently, 14-seater matatus are a common scene in the city streets, but will higher capacity buses pose any threat to the 14-seaters?
There should be no fear whatsoever. Actually, what they should be saying, and what we believe we have been telling them, is that we want them to invest in the right equipment, and we want to work with them to develop the industry. And I believe it will be good for everybody.
Well, the government has shelved plans to upgrade the defunct Kenya Meat Commission factory and instead will establish a new plant in Athi River. According to Livestock Principal Secretary Fred Segor, the government opted to go this route after realizing that it would be cheaper to construct a new plant with state-of-the-art machinery as opposed to spending billions in upgrading the obsolete technology at the meat processing plant. Well, let's now take a look at financial news. Well, that brings us to the end of our business news, and just before I let you go, we remember the Nyayo buses. Well, if the plan by the Ministry of Transport succeeds, probably, and I repeat probably, we might be getting new buses that will ease the congestion within the city. Well, that brings us to the end of our business news. Coming up next is sports. My name is Abi Agina. Do have yourself a pleasant evening.
KTN Sports kick off right now. I'm Lane Washira. And well, it's less than 2 weeks before the World Cross Country Championships kicks off in Guyang, China. And although Kenya is sending a strong team to the competition, the cross country fever is yet to engulf the athletic scenes as it did in the past. The day's cross country runners like Paul Tergat, John Ngugi and Kenenisa Bekele were the icing on the cake, are long gone, with most elite athletes conspicuously skipping what should be the ultimate build-up to the track season. The mention of the World Cross Country Championships brings memories of the days when every athlete wanted to be the ultimate king of the tough cross country courses. 5-time World Cross Country champions Paul Tergat and John Ngugi and 6 times champion Kenenisa Bekele epitomizes the generation of elite athletes to count their cross country success as an achievement. But those who should have carried on the mantle currently are slowly turning away from the cross country, something that has startled the Cross Country and Road Running Commission.
As a chairman of the World IF Cross Country Committee, this is something that we have been discussing all along. We know for sure it's not only in Kenya, the whole world, even the participation for the athletes have really gone down.
The change from an annual to the current biannual format has been cited by many athletes as one of the reasons why interest is on a nosedive. In the current format, an athlete needs back-to-back titles over a period of 12 years if they are to achieve Kenenisa Bekele's unprecedented 6 cross-country titles.
When the IAAF decided to have this event every 2 years, I think athletes have decided to use the stage to come up like we used to come up from cross-country. They have used other races like road races to build themselves.
The introduction of biannual World Cross Country was in good faith in the sense that we wanted at least those countries that never ran cross country to be given a chance that in between they organize their own cross country championships, especially the area, you know, like the African cross-country championships.
In a world where there are thousands of road races, Rosa Associates athletes manager Federico Rosa says the prize money at the World Cross-Country Championships has contributed to the threat facing the event.
No, honestly, it's start to go down and less money involved in the cross-country in Europe.
Outside there, they think cross-country is the domain of the East Africans, you know, and that's also people are saying could have made people to lose interest, especially countries from Europe or from America.
On the flip side, focus on too many road races at the expense of cross-country running has eventually led to the Kenyans' poor performance in long races. The Kenyan team to the World Cross-Country Championships in Guyang, China is currently training in Embu. Well, despite that nosedive, I must admit that I'm one of those people who really love the cross country. And moving on, idleness among most youth in Mandera and Wajir counties has been cited as a possible cause to the continuous inter-clan fighting. But leaders from the 2 neighboring counties have identified sports as the only way to engage youth and slowly but surely reduce the infighting.
Inter-clan clashes are a common phenomenon in many parts of Wajir and Mandera in Kenya's northeastern part, and those clashes have claimed several lives. The 2 counties have, however, resorted to using divergent ways of achieving peace, and soccer has come in handy. 21 youngsters drawn from the 2 counties are in Nairobi undergoing training that its architects hope it will slow but surely transform the way residents from the 2 counties will coexist. The 21 youngsters are few by any standards considering the area they are to cover, but just like a mustard seed, the message the few will carry after the training will spread far and wide in the affected areas.
Seen sports as a key to peace and conflict resolutions.
Inasaidia kabisa kwa sababu saizi kuna wengine watatutazama tukiwa pamoja Mandera County na Wajir County, na hiyo pia itatoa ile fikiria kwamba ati kuna vita juu saizi tuko pamoja na hakuna vita hapa.
As the youngsters blame the lack of exposure as a reason their counties have not had representation in the national team and other local clubs, their hope now is to transfer their skills they have acquired to people back home as they seek to promote football in their small ways.
If we go back to our place, then this land we shall go to show our young generation which are there, then they will expose to others.
The youngsters will have a Sports for Peace luncheon on Friday morning. For these youngsters, football is not only a sport, but also a pivotal pillar they are using to enhance peace in the community. Robinson Okenye, KTN Sports.
And Mumias-based professional golfer Dismas Indiza has bounced back to contention for the top prize at the 2015 KCB Golf Tour. Indiza is now a joint leader with Richard Ainley. Ainley had taken a 6-shot lead after day 2 at the Royal Nairobi Club, but Indiza used his massive experience to claw back to contention. Indiza and Ainley are now both on 5 under par 211. Brian Njoroge was the other best performer of the day 3. He and Indiza jointly won round 3 with an impressive round of 3 under par 72. Njoroge's performance moved him up from 8th position on Wednesday to join third with Greg Snow today. And that's how we wrap up tonight's edition of KTN Sports. I'm Lane Washura. Do have a very good night. Enjoy the rest of your viewing and definitely keep it KTN.
Well, it's time to wind up the bulletin, but let's take a look at the results for our big question tonight. We did ask you whether the Jubilee government has, or rather the Jubilee administration has done enough to fight corruption. An overwhelming result, this one.
That's right. 90% say no, 10% say yes. So a very clear distinction there. Thank you for your views this evening. And I'll read an SMS here. This one says, no, the Jubilee government has failed to counter this new colonial master called corruption. I wonder why the president is issuing threats to corruption architects in public instead of letting the system go for them in underground combat. And this is from Eric in Kiambu.
Paul Mwani on Twitter says, corrupt people to investigate themselves. Is the government fooling itself or fooling its citizens?
Right, another SMS here. This one says, no, but they haven't failed completely. The Jubilee government still has a chance to invest more resources and energy in the fight against corruption. There's one more optimistic than most.
Right, let's see. There's another one here from Nick Wamalo who says, no, the farthest they have gone is giving warnings. Tendering processes continue to be flouted.
Well, thank you for your views this evening and for watching KTN Prime. It was great to have you with us. William Silla was our sign language interpreter, and I'm Nancy Kachingira. Up next, JKL live with Afro cinema sensation Mama G.
Enjoy the rest of your viewing. My name is Wilson Mburu. See you tomorrow. Good night.